They told me my husband was gone. They handed me his debts, his burdens, his failures, and they expected me to cry quietly. But let me tell you something, baby, when I saw that man alive hugging his lover like death had never touched him, I did not cry. I rose. Ladies and gentlemen, let me pull up a chair and tell you something real. Life has a way of slapping you right across the face and then asking you if you want seconds. I was sitting there grieving a man I believed was buried 6 feet deep, only to discover he was standing upright kissing a woman who was not me. Oh honey, I felt every emotion a good God-fearing woman is not supposed to say out loud. Betrayal, heartbreak, shock, rage, and then a strange kind of peace because truth frees you even when it burns. So tonight I am going to tell you how I inherited the debts of a so-called dead husband, how I found him alive and well wrapped around his lover, and how that moment changed my entire life. And baby, I want you to listen close because this story is not about revenge. It is about awakening. Betrayal does not break you, it reveals you, and I learned that truth on the day my world flipped inside out. When people talk about betrayal, they speak like it is a wrecking ball that smashes everything a person has built, but let me tell you something real. Betrayal is not destruction. Betrayal is revelation. It pulls back every curtain, every illusion, every excuse, and leaves only the truth standing in the center of your life like a spotlight shining too bright to ignore. That is exactly what happened the moment I saw the man I had been told was dead standing alive and well with another woman held tight in his arms. Before that moment I thought I knew myself. I believed I was loyal, patient, forgiving, and soft where softness was needed. I believed I was built to endure because life had taught me repeated lessons about carrying burdens with grace. So when they came to my door and told me my husband was gone, taken from this world by some sudden cruel twist, I did what any loving wife would have done. I cried. I shook. I tried to understand the kind of empty silence grief brings into a home. I walked through each day like my bones were made of paper and every step might tear them. I mourned the man I thought he was and the life we had built together. I wore black. I prayed. I comforted people who came to comfort me because that is who I was. But his death did something else to me. It stripped my life down to the studs. It forced me to face a future I never asked for. Bills I never saw before showed up with his name and my responsibility. Secrets I never imagined lay hidden beneath the surface of our marriage like stones waiting to trip me. I kept thinking if only he were alive he would explain this. He would make sense of this. He would fix this. That is love talking. That is loyalty. But loyalty can blind you when truth is waiting in the shadows. So when I turned that corner and saw him standing there very much alive and wrapped around a woman he once introduced as a coworker, something inside me snapped, and then instantly something inside me solidified. At first there was shock so sharp it felt like my breath had been stolen straight from my chest. I was frozen, like my mind had suddenly lost the ability to interpret what my eyes were seeing. My dead husband was alive. My partner, my companion, my I will love you forever was breathing, laughing, holding someone else as if he had never made vows to me. There should have been heartbreak, and yes, a sliver of it hit like a shard of glass. But beneath that heartbreak something unexpected rose. Strength, power, clarity. It was like betrayal reached into me and flipped a switch I did not know existed. Instead of falling apart, I stood still and let truth wash over me. Suddenly every lie, every strange unexplained night, every odd moment that did not make sense fell into place like puzzle pieces that had been scattered across years. Betrayal did not break me. It simply showed me the truth that had been hiding behind his smile. People think betrayal destroys the heart, but betrayal actually reveals the heart. When someone shatters your trust, you discover who you really are beneath the pain. Some people crumble. Some people run. Some people try to mend what was never whole in the first place. I did none of that. I stood there feeling a fire inside me that I had not felt in years. Not anger exactly, though anger would come later. Not bitterness, because bitterness is heavy and I refused to carry what did not belong to me. It was something deeper, something stronger. It was like meeting the part of myself that had been waiting for the truth so she could finally wake up. I realized in that moment that betrayal strips away illusions, not identity. My identity had nothing to do with him or his lies. I was still the woman who held a home together with love and discipline. I was still the woman who worked hard, who prayed, who cared for people even when she was hurting. The betrayal simply showed me I was also the woman who could walk away from a lie even if that lie had once held her heart. Let me tell you this. When a person betrays you, they expect to see you break. They expect tears and begging and desperation. They expect you to crumble because that is how control works. But when you refuse to collapse, when you stand tall, when you allow truth to settle in without letting pain control your decisions, you become someone they never imagined you could be. You become powerful. You become dangerous to their deception. You become the version of yourself that does not need their love or their lies or their approval to breathe. As I stood there watching his hands around another woman, I realized something else. Betrayal reveals character, and not just theirs. It reveals yours. That moment showed me I had spent years underestimating my own strength because I had spent years protecting the feelings of a man who had none for me. It showed me I had mistaken patience for weakness when in truth patience is power in disguise. I had assumed loyalty meant staying even when loyalty should mean staying true to yourself. Some people think betrayal is the end of their story, but betrayal is often the beginning. It is the moment the universe rips away everything false so you can build something honest. It is the moment you stop living inside someone else's shadow and step fully into your own light. Painful, yes, but necessary, life-changing, transformative. And let me say this clearly. Betrayal does not say anything about the worth of the person betrayed. It only exposes the emptiness in the betrayer. My husband faking his death spoke volumes about his fear, his cowardice, his selfishness. It spoke about his inability to be honest or responsible. But it did not say one single thing about my value. If anything, his betrayal revealed my value. Because he feared facing me. He feared my strength. He feared what the truth might cost him. So when I say betrayal does not break you, it reveals you. I mean it with every piece of my soul. It reveals your resilience. It reveals your courage. It reveals your ability to walk forward even when the past tries to chain you down. It reveals that you can survive truth, even ugly truth, because truth is always better than living inside a lie. That day I discovered a version of myself I did not know I had. A woman who could stand in the face of heartbreak and not fall. A woman who could stare betrayal in the eye and feel her own strength rising. A woman who realized she had been powerful long before she ever needed to prove it. Betrayal did not break me. It opened my eyes. It opened my heart. It opened my future. It revealed me not as a victim but as a survivor rising into her own truth at last. Grief can blind you, but truth will wake you up, and I learned that lesson in the hardest way a woman can learn anything. When they told me my husband had died, it was as if someone had snatched the sun out of the sky and left me standing in the cold dark of an unexpected winter. Grief settled over me like a heavy blanket that I could not lift. It wrapped itself around my heart, my thoughts, my days and my nights. Every step I took felt like walking through mud, and every breath felt like I was trying to inhale through a wall of water. That is what grief does. It dulls your senses. It dims your vision. It pulls you deep into a fog that makes it hard to see anything but the ache that fills you from the inside out. When you lose someone you love, you stop seeing the world as it is and start seeing it through the lens of loss. Food does not taste right. Music sounds different. Time stretches in strange ways. Some minutes last forever while entire days disappear in a haze. Grief is a thief that steals clarity and leaves confusion in its place. I kept asking myself why this had happened. Why him? Why us? What was I supposed to do now that the future I had trusted simply no longer existed? I went through the motions of life because that is what grieving people do. We do not live. We move. We drift. We endure. I sat in church with my hands folded tight, just trying to stay upright. I answered people with soft thank yous when they offered sympathy. I handled paperwork and signed documents I barely understood, because the world does not stop for grief no matter how shattered you feel. I walked through each task like I was underwater, hearing everything muffled and slow. That is the blindness grief brings. You do not see reality. You see pain and everything else as shadow. But even in that darkness there were things I noticed deep down, even if I refused to admit it to myself. Little details that did not add up. Bills that did not match our life. Accounts I had never seen. Calls he had taken late at night with voices he said belonged to coworkers. I had brushed away those uneasy feelings because love makes you believe the best even when something inside you whispers the truth. But grief made me vulnerable. Vulnerability made me trusting. Trusting made me blind. I believed everything I was told because believing was easier than questioning at a time when I could barely breathe. Everyone said my husband died. Everyone said they were sorry. Everyone said I must stay strong. They said it with soft eyes and gentle voices because they thought that was what I needed. Maybe they were right or maybe they were wrong, but in that moment the only thing I truly needed was truth, and truth was nowhere to be found. So I built a little world inside myself made of memories and longing. I walked around pretending life still made sense even though nothing made sense anymore. That is what grief does. It makes you cling to the past because the present feels unbearable. I told myself he was the man I knew. I told myself he loved me. I told myself the pain came from love, not deception. I told myself so many stories that eventually the stories felt more real than reality. But grief cannot hold back truth forever. Truth is persistent. Truth is patient. Truth waits in silence, watching you stumble through the fog until the moment arrives when it pulls you awake. And that moment for me came when I turned a corner and saw a man I had buried in my heart standing alive in the open light. That moment was so powerful it hit like lightning. The kind of lightning that splits a tree straight down the middle. I remember the world becoming still. Not quiet, not calm, still, as if time itself froze to let me understand what my eyes were seeing. There he stood alive and whole, not a scar on him, not a sign of suffering, not a trace of the tragedy I had mourned. And he was not alone. His arms were wrapped around another woman in a way no innocent explanation could ever defend. I felt a jolt travel through me like my soul had been yanked back into my body after drifting for months. The fog lifted. The blindness dropped away. Every piece of grief I had carried shattered like brittle glass because grief cannot survive truth. That is the awakening truth brings. It does not knock softly. It does not wait for permission. Truth bursts in like a storm, tearing down everything false so the real can finally be seen. I saw him in that embrace. I saw her. I saw the lies. I saw the betrayal buried beneath months, maybe years of excuses and secrets. I saw the real cause of the debts, the confusion, the strange absences, the unexplained paperwork. It was all laid bare in a single moment. And strangely the pain did not crush me. The truth lifted me. Grief had felt like drowning, but truth felt like taking the first full breath after breaking the surface of deep cold water. It hurt, yes, but it also freed me. Every tear I had shed was for a man I believed had loved me. But the truth showed me that man had not been mine long before the world claimed he died. The truth woke me up to a reality I had refused to see because grief had clouded my vision. Truth also brought anger. Not loud, wild anger, but steady, righteous anger. The kind of anger that sharpens your mind and straightens your spine. The kind of anger that helps you see what you deserve and what you must walk away from. That anger did not control me. It guided me. It told me I had every right to stop mourning a man who had betrayed his vows. It told me I had every right to reclaim my peace. It told me I had every right to rebuild my life from the ashes of a false story. Grief had made me fragile. Truth made me strong again. Grief made me doubt my instincts. Truth restored them. Grief convinced me I had lost everything. Truth showed me I had lost nothing worth keeping. In that moment I understood that grief blinds the heart but truth clears the eyes. Grief narrows your vision to one small corner of loss, but truth widens the world again, showing roads you forgot existed. Grief traps you in memories while truth pulls you forward into what comes next. Both are painful, both transform you, but only truth frees you. I walked away from that moment feeling awake for the first time in months, maybe years. The woman who turned that corner had been drowning in sorrow. The woman who walked away was standing tall with solid ground beneath her feet. That is what truth does. It wakes you from whatever dream or nightmare you have been trapped in, and it pushes you back into your life with new strength. Grief blinded me, but truth opened my eyes. And I will tell you something important. Once your eyes open, they do not close again. Not for lies, not for love, not for anyone. Pain is powerful, but clarity is unstoppable, and I learned that truth the moment reality hit me harder than any heartbreak ever could. When you discover that the person you loved, trusted, supported and defended has been living a lie, you feel pain that does not sit in one place. It spreads through your body like fire, burning through every memory, every promise, every shared moment until nothing feels safe anymore. Pain shakes you, pain rattles you, pain makes you question the ground under your feet. But clarity does something deeper. Clarity roots you. Clarity steadies you. Clarity turns pain into purpose. When I first saw him alive standing there with that woman pressed against his chest, I felt pain slam through me like a wave that wanted to drag me under. For a moment I could not move. I could not speak. I could not breathe. It felt like someone had taken all the air out of the world and left me standing in a vacuum where sound, thought and breath no longer worked. My eyes saw him. My heart refused to accept it. My mind tried to make sense of something senseless. Pain does that. It paralyzes you. It refuses to let you understand because understanding would mean accepting the truth. But then something inside me began to shift. Pain that had felt like a weight suddenly changed. It started to sharpen. It started to focus. It started to point me towards something I had been avoiding for far too long. Clarity. And clarity does not come softly. It comes like a force pushing through the fog and demanding to be seen. I realized in that moment that pain and clarity are partners. Pain wakes you. Clarity guides you. Pain shakes the walls of your life. Clarity shows you the door that leads to freedom. I stood there watching them together and I felt both forces rising inside me like two storms merging into one. And strangely, instead of drowning me, they lifted me. The pain reminded me of every night I waited for him. Every time he said he was working late. Every call he stepped outside to take. Every holiday that felt slightly off though I could never explain why. Every excuse he gave with a gentle smile that I wanted so badly to believe. Pain reminded me of all the questions I had pushed down because love can silence intuition when you let it. But clarity spoke louder than pain. Clarity whispered truths that had been hiding beneath the surface for years. Clarity told me that those strange nights made sense now. Clarity told me that the hidden papers, the unexplained charges, the distant expressions were all pieces of a puzzle he hoped I would never solve. Clarity told me that the debts I inherited were not tragic accidents but consequences of choices he made long before the world told me he died. Pain showed me the wound. Clarity showed me its cause. Pain shook my heart but clarity rebuilt it. Pain made me cry but clarity made me strong. Standing there I felt something else blooming inside me. Power. A kind of quiet, grounded power that grows only when illusions fall away. Pain had opened a door. Clarity walked through it, and once it arrived, nothing looked the same again. Clarity allowed me to see him not as the man I hoped he was but as the man he truly had always been. A man who hid behind secrets. A man who took more than he gave. A man who lied to protect his comfort, not my heart. A man who faked his own death rather than face the truth he had created. Clarity stripped away every apology I had once whispered for him. Every excuse I made. Every time I defended behavior that deserved questions, not forgiveness. Pain had tried to hold me hostage. Clarity freed me. People often say that pain changes you, but I believe clarity is what transforms you. Pain alone only wounds. Clarity heals by revealing what can no longer continue. Clarity is what turns heartbreak into wisdom. It is what takes suffering and shapes it into strength. It is what teaches you to step out of the shadow of someone else's lies and into the light of your own truth. As I stood there watching them, I realized that the veil had finally lifted. I was no longer a grieving widow. I was a woman staring straight into the face of deception and refusing to look away. I was no longer floating through life weighed down by unanswered questions. I was fully awake, fully aware, fully present. Pain had cracked my heart, but clarity stepped into the crack and filled it with truth that would not bend. I walked away from them not because I was weak but because clarity showed me I was powerful enough to leave. Pain had wanted me to fall to my knees. Clarity told me to keep walking. Pain had wanted me to scream. Clarity told me silence would speak louder. Pain had wanted me to collapse. Clarity told me to rise. Clarity also taught me something deeper. Pain comes from attachment. Clarity comes from understanding. Pain cries, "Why did this happen to me?" Clarity says this happened for you because now you can see what you were meant to see. Pain says, "I do not deserve this." Clarity says you deserve better. Pain holds you in the past. Clarity releases you into the future. The more I embraced clarity, the less power pain had over me. Every step forward felt like reclaiming a part of myself he had taken. Every breath felt like freedom. Every thought felt sharper, stronger, cleaner. I could finally hear my own voice again, not muffled by grief, not weakened by confusion, but clear, steady, unwavering. Clarity became the part of me that refused to be deceived again. Pain might break the heart, but clarity strengthens the soul. And my soul needed strengthening more than anything. Clarity helped me see that I had spent years pouring love into someone who did not know how to honor it. Clarity helped me stop carrying guilt that was never mine to hold. Clarity helped me understand that trusting the wrong person does not make you foolish. It makes you human, and surviving betrayal makes you powerful. Clarity showed me that my story did not end with his lies. Clarity showed me that betrayal was not my downfall but my awakening. Clarity showed me that the life I thought I lost was never meant for me anyway. I deserved a life built on truth, not deception. Love, not manipulation. Peace, not chaos. As I walked away, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not the fragile kind that depends on someone else. The strong kind. The grounded kind. The kind that comes from knowing you are choosing yourself for the first time in far too long. Pain cannot give you that. Only clarity can. Clarity turns broken pieces into lessons. Clarity turns heartache into direction. Clarity turns betrayal into freedom. And on that day, clarity turned me from a grieving wife into a woman reborn. When I followed that man through the busy street and into the quiet park, I felt the weight of every lie he had ever spoken settle onto my shoulders. The world around me felt far away. People laughed, children played, and birds hopped around searching for crumbs, yet I moved as if underwater, guided only by the pull of a truth I never wanted. I watched the back of his head and wondered how many times I had kissed that same head, believing it held the thoughts of an honest man. My heart pounded in my chest almost loud enough to drown out my fear. But something stronger than fear pushed me forward. It was the need for answers, the need to reclaim my dignity, the need to look betrayal in the face instead of letting it lurk in the shadows of my thoughts. I stopped behind a cluster of trees and waited as he sat on a bench. He looked carefree, as if the world held no burden for him, as if he had not left me drowning in debts, despair, and shame. Then she arrived. The same woman he had hugged before, the same woman who should have been a stranger yet somehow felt like my own personal ghost. She walked toward him with a soft smile, and he rose to greet her with open arms. They embraced with a warmth I had not felt from him in years. That moment stabbed deeper than any blade could. I felt my breath hitch, as though the air had thickened around me and refused to enter my lungs. I had lived beside lies before, but never one this bold, never one this cruel. I had mourned this man. I had cried for him. I had defended him in front of creditors who spat names at me. I had prayed for his soul, thinking he had died frightened and alone. And yet here he was, alive and glowing with joy, in the arms of another woman, while I stood there barely holding myself upright. I wanted to scream, yet my voice refused to rise. I wanted to confront them, yet my legs held still as if rooted to the earth itself. So I watched. I watched the man I once loved kiss the forehead of someone who was not me. I watched him hold her hands as if they were priceless treasures. I watched them talk with a lightness that made it clear he had not only abandoned me but created a new life free from the debts and responsibilities he left in my lap. Every moment felt like a blow, and still I could not look away. It was as though I needed to absorb the full weight of the truth in order to ever move forward again. The world I had built around faith, trust, and shared dreams crumbled at my feet in that quiet park. But amid the collapse, something inside me began to shift. Something strong. Something fierce. I realized then that this man had believed I would remain the same gentle wife who forgave too easily, who carried burdens without complaint, who hid her hurt behind a polite smile. He thought I would accept his disappearance and swallow the pain like I always had. He assumed I would lie down and accept his debts as a final insult. But watching him in that moment awakened something he had never expected. A fire that had been sleeping inside me rose with the kind of steady heat that no betrayal could extinguish. And with that fire came clarity. If he could fake his death to escape responsibility, then he could face the consequences of that choice. If he could build a new life on the ashes of mine, then I had every right to rise from those ashes and claim what was owed to me. I stepped forward quietly, at first testing my resolve like a child dipping her foot into cold water. But with each step the fire inside me grew stronger, steadier. Soon I felt like a woman reborn, not fragile, not broken, but sharpened by truth. I stood behind the bench and waited for that man to turn around and see me. I wanted him to witness the strength he had awakened. I wanted him to understand that I was no longer the woman he had left behind. I wanted him to feel the shock, the panic, and the regret that only truth can deliver. When he finally turned, his eyes met mine and froze. His expression shifted from joy to confusion to fear, all within the span of a single breath. That moment did not heal my wounds, but it fueled my strength. Because I saw in his face the greatest truth of all. He had expected me to stay broken. He had expected me to disappear quietly. He had expected me to carry his burdens while he enjoyed freedom. But he never expected me to stand tall in front of him, ready to reclaim my power. And that was the moment I knew that this chapter of my life, though painful, would end with me rising, not with me defeated. When he saw me standing there, something inside that man collapsed like a house built on rotten wood. He tried to speak, but no sound came out, and for a brief moment I felt a strange sense of justice. Not joy, not satisfaction, just the solid, quiet truth that the scales were finally shifting back toward balance. His lover looked from him to me, then back at him again with wide, frightened eyes, and I could see the confusion blooming on her face. She had no idea who I was. She had no idea what lies he had used to build his delicate little fantasy life. She had no idea that the debts, the grief, the humiliation, and the sleepless nights he had dumped onto my shoulders were all part of the very story he had used to charm her. And I realized right then that she was not the one I needed to blame. She was just another victim of his talent for deceit, though her wounds were different from mine. She had been given a dream while mine had been shattered. She had been handed false love while I had been handed ruin. But she did not know. So I held my anger steady and let it settle where it belonged. On him. He stood there like a child caught stealing from a church donation box. His lips trembled and his hands shook, and I could almost see his mind scrambling for a way out. But lies were his only tools, and I had destroyed the foundation they relied on simply by standing in front of him, alive, angry, and unbroken. He reached for me as if that would somehow fix the damage he had caused, yet the moment his hand lifted I stepped back with a certainty I had never felt before. I did not want his touch. I did not need his excuses. I needed truth. Not the twisted truth he crafted with careful little half sentences, but the real truth, the one that had been buried beneath debt and betrayal and cowardice. I asked him why. The word left my mouth softly, almost gently, but its impact felt loud enough to shake the ground beneath us. Why had he faked his death? Why had he left me drowning in bills and judgment? Why had he taken the years we built together and tossed them aside like trash? Why had he chosen to destroy me instead of simply walking away like an honest man? He opened his mouth and closed it again, and for a long breath he just stared at me with eyes filled with fear and guilt and the kind of selfish shame that never leads to real remorse. He finally whispered something about pressure, something about fear, something about wanting a fresh start. But every word felt hollow and weak, like paper soaking in water until it falls apart. He said he never meant to hurt me. And something inside me almost laughed. Because people who never mean to hurt anyone do not stage their own deaths. They do not leave their partners to choke on the wreckage of their choices. They do not hand over debts like poisoned gifts and vanish into the night. People who never mean to hurt anyone do not create two lives, one of suffering and one of ease, and choose to hide inside the easy one. But I did not raise my voice. I did not break down. I just looked at him and saw the truth. He was not sorry for what he did. He was only sorry that I found him alive. He was only sorry that his new life was in danger of falling apart. He was only sorry that the consequences he had been hiding from were standing in front of him, wearing my face. His lover stepped toward us, hesitant but brave, and asked him who I was. She asked him what was going on. She asked him why he looked like a ghost who had just seen another ghost. And I watched as he struggled to answer, because the truth would expose every lie he had told her. He tried to dodge the questions, but she kept pressing. She had a strength she likely never knew she possessed, because betrayal has a way of waking strength in people like a spark hitting dry grass. And he knew he could not hide anymore. So he said it. He said I was his wife. Not his widow, not his ex, not a woman from his distant past. His wife. The one he had sworn loyalty to. The one he had legally bound himself to until death. The one he had left to face a financial battlefield without armor. The moment he said those words her face changed. Shock washed over her, then disappointment, then anger. A deep, steady, righteous anger. She stepped back from him as if realizing he was a stranger disguised as a man she cared for. And in that moment I felt a sense of strange, unexpected sisterhood. Not friendship, not forgiveness, just the unspoken understanding of two women who realized they had been played by the same selfish man. She looked at me with sorrow in her eyes, not pity but sorrow, the kind that acknowledges pain without exploiting it. And she apologized, though she was not the one who hurt me. I thanked her, though I owed her nothing. Because sometimes two people can stand on opposite sides of a wound and still recognize each other as human. Then she turned to him and demanded answers of her own. She asked what lies he fed her. She asked what stories he crafted to make her believe she was special. She asked how he could betray someone so deeply and then build a new life without remorse. And he stood there, trapped, locked between us, like a child held accountable in the harshest, brightest light he had ever faced. His excuses shrank. His voice weakened. His posture slumped. And for the first time I felt something close to peace. Not because he suffered, but because I finally saw the truth clearly without the fog of grief or shock. He was not powerful. He was not clever. He was not tragic or misunderstood. He was weak. Utterly, painfully weak. And the debts he left me with were nothing compared to the emptiness he carried inside himself. I told him calmly that I would not be carrying his burdens anymore. I would not be the woman who paid for his mistakes with my life. I would not let him hide behind lies while I suffered in silence. I told him I would be holding him accountable in every way the law allowed. I told him the debt collectors would no longer be knocking at my door but his. And I told him that the freedom he tried to steal would be reclaimed by me piece by piece starting now. His lover stepped away from him and told him she wanted nothing more to do with him. She walked past me with her head held high, and I admired that strength. She could leave, and so could I, but he could not escape anymore. Not from truth, not from consequences, and not from me, because the woman he abandoned had risen stronger than he ever imagined, and the fire inside me was only growing brighter. When I walked away from that park I felt the world shift beneath my feet, as if I had stepped out of a long endless tunnel and into fresh open air for the first time in years. My chest felt tight yet lighter at the same time, filled with feelings I could barely name. Pain yes, strength yes, fear yes, but also something new, a quiet rising sense that I was finally claiming the life that had been stolen from me piece by piece. The sun warmed my skin, and for the first time since the day I believed my husband had died I felt the warmth as something real, not a shadow, not an illusion, not a moment I did not deserve. I had been living in sorrow for so long that I had forgotten what hope felt like. But on that walk home hope followed me like a steady, silent companion. As my steps carried me forward I thought of all the nights I had spent awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why life had turned on me so quickly. I thought of the calls from debt collectors who treated me like a criminal. I thought of the sympathy from neighbors whose pity stung more than their kindness soothed. I thought of the weight of grief that had crushed my chest every time I remembered the man I thought I lost. And now I knew that grief had not been real. It had been built on lies. But the pain I suffered had been real. My tears had been real. The loneliness had been real. The suffering had been real. Yet somehow, standing there in the truth of everything I had endured, I realized that something else had been real too. My endurance. My resilience. My strength. I had been fighting battles I never asked for, and still I stood. I had carried burdens meant for two people on shoulders built for one, and still I stood. I had been betrayed not just by a man but by the life I thought we had, and still I stood. That realization filled me with a fire that spread through my heart like dawn rising over a dark field. I was done surviving. It was time to live. When I entered my home the silence no longer felt like a punishment. It felt like freedom. The walls that once echoed with heavy memories now felt open, waiting for me to place new moments inside them, moments that would be mine, not shadows of someone else. I sat down at the small wooden table that had once held warm dinners and quiet conversations, and I placed my hands flat on its surface, grounding myself in the present. This table had held my sorrow long enough. Now it would hold my strength. I reached for the stack of letters that had haunted me for months. Bills, statements, threats and warnings all tangled together like vines choking the roots of my peace. I looked at them without fear for the first time. These debts were not born from my choices. They were born from his. And I would no longer pay for a life he abandoned. I gathered the papers and sorted them into piles. I wrote names, I wrote dates, I wrote notes and plans with steady, careful strokes. Every mark of the pen felt like reclaiming power. I could not erase the past, but I could take charge of what came next. I could bring truth to the places where lies had lived too long. I visited offices. I made calls. I spoke to people who once brushed me aside and now listened as I laid out the truth piece by piece with calm, unwavering strength. I told them the story of the man who pretended to die to escape responsibility. I told them how he left me with the wreckage of his choices. I told them how I found him alive, living a new life built on deceit. And as the truth spread, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders brick by heavy brick. Some people gasped. Some shook their heads. Some apologized for doubting me. But I did not seek their approval. I sought justice. And justice began to unfold slowly like a flower opening after a long winter. His accounts were traced. His actions were reviewed. His signature was compared to documents he thought I had never seen. And one by one the debts were shifted from my name to his, where they always belonged. With every confirmation, with every official stamp, with every acknowledgement of the truth, I felt myself grow taller inside my spirit. Victory did not come in a loud burst. It came in steady, undeniable steps. When everything was finished, I walked out of the last office with my head high and my heart steady. For the first time in a long time, I was not carrying the past on my back. I was facing the future with open hands, ready to shape it into something better, something honest, something fully my own. I realized then that I had not only regained my life, I had rebuilt my strength. I had forged it in the fire of every sleepless night, every doubt, every tear, and every betrayal. And it was stronger because of it. Days turned into weeks and I found myself changing in small ways that felt big. I smiled more freely. I breathed more deeply. I walked with a steadiness I never had before. I said no when I needed to. I said yes only when it felt right. I learned to love my own company. I learned to trust my own judgment. I learned that healing is not a single moment but a journey made of countless small steps that lead you back to yourself. And as I stood in front of my mirror one morning, I looked at the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were wiser. Her heart was scarred. Her spirit was unbreakable. She had been abandoned, betrayed, used and lied to, yet she still stood tall. She still stood proud. She still stood whole. And in that moment I knew the greatest truth of all. My husband may have tried to escape his life, but I had reclaimed mine. He tried to bury me under the weight of his mistakes, but I rose from beneath them stronger than he ever imagined. He thought he could walk away and leave me broken, but I became a woman who cannot be broken. A woman who will never again let anyone diminish her worth. A woman who learned that sometimes the worst betrayal is the beginning of your strongest chapter. And that chapter was mine to write. Only mine.